thalamus, the very region from which gonadotropin-releasing hormone, our old friend from a couple hours ago in this discussion, you're going to disrupt GnRH secretion. You can disrupt pituitary function with alcohol. Again and again, what we're seeing is that consuming more than 1 or 2 drinks per week of alcohol is really detrimental to the entire process of fertility and the entire process of healthy pregnancy. And that's true from both the male side and the sperm, and it's true from the female side and the egg. So my simple advice on this is if you are wishing to have a healthy fertilization and pregnancy, the best thing to do would be avoid alcohol altogether. And if you're going to drink, to really limit that drinking to 1 or 2 drinks per week maximum. So those are the major don'ts. Really avoid excessive stress. And I should mention, excessive stress is not just best avoided by getting enough quality sleep at night, although that is the primary way. There are other ways to avoid stress. We've done entire episodes about this, and we have a toolkit related to reducing stress with very simple zero-cost tools. Again, you can find all that at hubermanlab.com. And I should mention, if you want to find any episode or topic or timestamp, that website is keyword search available. So you can just go to hubermanlab.com, put into the search function stress tools, and a bunch of different links will pop up related to those topics. Likewise with sleep, likewise with any number of different topics you might be interested in. So get enough quality sleep and thereby reduce stress, and also directly buffer stress with real-time tools to buffer stress that I've talked about in the episodes that you can access. And there are ways to greatly reduce your overall level of stress, to limit any cortisol that's released early in the day, which is when you want cortisol released, and not have it late in the day, and so on and so forth. So reduce your stress. And as I just told you, by all means, do not drink more than 2 drinks per week, and 0 is better than 2. If anyone tells you, oh, well, there's all this resveratrol in red wine and that's good for us, the data simply tell us that there's not enough resveratrol in red wine to really have any positive health benefit. The data around resveratrol and health benefits itself is under question nowadays. 0 alcohol is better than any alcohol. 2 drinks per week is the limit. Also, limit or eliminate or avoid nicotine and ideally cannabis smoking and vaping at the time in which you are trying to get pregnant. And certainly if you are pregnant, avoid all of the things as best you can that I just described a moment ago. Now, there are a couple other don'ts that are really important. One of the most important don'ts relates to STIs, or sexually transmitted infections. Everyone who's sexually active should get an STI check. In fact, if you go to a fertility clinic or you go for sperm analysis or you go for egg analysis, almost always they will do an STI check, even if you happen to be in a monogamous relationship, even if you happen to be not sexually active and you're somebody who's seeking to use IVF with a sperm donor or something of that sort. Why would they do that? Why is there so much concern about that? Is it about avoiding giving birth to a child that has something like a herpes infection or something, or HIV? Well, certainly that's one reason, but that's a down the line reason, because at the time when someone goes into the clinic for one of these sperm or egg analyses, I mean, that's well in advance of any pregnancy, right? The reason is there are a number of STIs, in particular chlamydia, for which it greatly increases the probability of miscarriage. So chlamydia is one of those very insidious and cryptic STIs, because a lot of people, both males and females, don't even realize that they have chlamydia, and then they can carry chlamydia at the time in which they conceive, and then that can lead to ectopic pregnancies and or miscarriages. So by all means, get an STI check if you are somebody who's seeking to conceive children or evaluating your fertility generally. Chlamydia can also have damaging effects on the epididymis and on the various other aspects of male reproductive health. In the future, we will do an episode all about sexual health. This is not the time for that, but get an STI check if your goal is to conceive a healthy child. Now, the other thing that can have a very negative impact on fertility and healthy pregnancy is a viral infection. For instance, if a male has had a severe viral illness, and this could be any number of different viral illnesses, from flu to cold or any number of different viruses, pick your favorite virus, in the previous 70 to 90 days, that can greatly diminish the number and or quality of sperm. Okay? So that's really important. This is also important if you're going to go in and do a sperm analysis and you had a viral infection in the previous 70 to 90 days, well, then you need to be aware of that, because it could greatly impact the parameters of that sperm analysis. Likewise, for women, if you've had a serious viral infection in the previous 30 days, does that mean you should not try and conceive? Not necessarily, but you should talk to your OBGYN about that. There are data showing that viral infection, in particular of influenza in the mother in the first trimester of pregnancy, has some correlation. It's not 100%, but some correlation with negative mental health outcomes of the offspring sometime later, including schizophrenia. This is some of the work that was done at Caltech a number of years ago, and other laboratories as well. Those data are still being built up over time. Again, it's not one for one. It's not causal. So if you did get an influenza or a cold or other kind of viral infection during the first trimester or any trimester of pregnancy, I don't want to cause alarm, but you should talk to your OBGYN about this. The goal, of course, is to avoid viral illness at any time when you're trying to conceive or have a healthy pregnancy. But of course, sometimes people will get ill, and the children can turn out to be perfectly normal and fine, but it is something that you want to avoid, and it will impact your egg analysis and it will impact sperm analysis. Now, one thing I found really surprising in researching this episode was that 1 in 25 men carry a copy of a mutation for cystic fibrosis. Now, some of you are probably familiar with cystic fibrosis as a condition that can cause issues with the lungs, the accumulation of fluid in the lungs or other tissues. Cystic fibrosis, in order to express that way of accumulation of fluid in the lungs, you really need 2 copies, right? You need 2 mutant copies, or you need 2 copies of the cystic fibrosis gene. 1 in 25 men will carry just 1 copy and therefore will not have any symptoms of cystic fibrosis. But those 1 in 25 men will have defects in the architecture of the vas deferens, the duct through which the ejaculate needs to pass in order to eventually be ejaculated out of the urethra. And so what that means is that these men can have what appears to be normal semen volume, but that they won't have normal numbers of sperm. And that's not because of a deficit in making the sperm. The testes can function just fine. The brain and the pituitary communicating with the testes just fine, but that literally the passageway by which those sperm arrive within the seminal fluid and are eventually ejaculated is disrupted by the cystic fibrosis gene. Luckily, if somebody has just 1 copy of the cystic fibrosis gene and they're male, and this is the issue, the vas deferens either can be repaired by a urologist who's expert in the surgical repair of vas deferens, or sperm can be extracted from the testicle directly, which might sound like a painful procedure, but I believe nowadays, in talking with various experts on this, turns out that it can be done with a minimum of discomfort. And certainly if the goal is to have a healthy child, you're going to need those sperm, so you're going to want to get them one way or the other, regardless of the discomfort. Now, before getting into some of the things that you can do in the positive sense to increase your fertility, we do need to touch on just a few other things that you want to avoid in order to avoid diminishing your fertility. And this mainly relates to males, but it will also be relevant to females. And of course, when I say also relevant to females, I'm referring to the fact that if it's a woman and a man who are trying to conceive, then she, of course, is going to be interested in her egg quality, but also the sperm quality. And of course, there are women who are conceiving by way of sperm donor, through IVF or IUI or otherwise. But in any case, the need to understand and maximize the quality of both the egg and the sperm is paramount. So in order for men to maximize the quality of their sperm, as I mentioned earlier, does not seem to be a big difference whether or not they use boxers or briefs or whether or not they, quote unquote, go commando. They don't wear any boxers or briefs of any kind. However, it is important to keep the testicles cool enough. They need to be about 2 degrees cooler than the rest of the body. And there are a number of different ways to do that. As I mentioned before, avoid going in hot tubs during the period in which you're trying to conceive children. You should also avoid going in saunas during the period in which you're trying to conceive children. And if you do go in the sauna, you can bring an ice pack there and you can put it on the testicles in order to offset the heat of the sauna and keep the testicles cool while in the sauna. The other thing that you'll definitely want to do is avoid putting a laptop or any other hot device directly onto your lap. There are a number of different devices that you can put on your lap. You can put books or a box, or there are these devices that are designed to dispel the heat from the laptop. I would say if you're trying to conceive, just keep the laptop off of your lap. Just put it on a table or standing desk or whatever. Just keep it off of your lap. Also, there are some really interesting data showing that the amount of time that men spend sitting, regardless of whether or not they sit with their ankle on their opposite knee or with knees spread, the classic man spread stance, or any other kind of seated stance, is going to increase the temperature of the scrotum for reasons that are somewhat obvious if you think about the architecture of all this. I think both men and women, if you put enough thought to it, you go, oh yeah, that would increase the temperature. Obviously avoid seat heaters in cars or otherwise, but Reducing the total amount of time that you spend seated is really important if you want to keep the temperature and milieu of the scrotum optimal for sperm quality and fertilization. And as I mentioned